Hello there, I'm Action News Jack's first alert meteorologist Trevor Gibbs. Today is Saturday, March 7th at the time of this recording, and we spring forward an hour tomorrow morning, early Sunday, with the beginning of daylight saving time. So our sunrises and sunsets will be later, just a sign of the changing seasons and spring not that far away. But we've already started meteorological spring. That began March 1st. Whereas astronomical spring is what you typically would think of when you think of the beginning of spring, and that is going to be on the equinox, which is March 20th. So different structure here to the seasons. The meteorological seasons are such that it helps the data records, the data books looking back in time, nice even months. So meteorological spring is March, April, May. Meteorological summer is June, July, August. Meteorological fall is September, October, November. And then lastly, meteorological winter is December, January, and February. And as you know, if you've lived in North Florida or South Georgia, it's been very dry for the last two meteorological seasons, meteorological fall and winter. So let's take a look back, September through February at Jacksonville International Airport in terms of how much rain was observed there at the official climate site at the airport. 2 inches in September, little more than 2 in October, none in November. That was the second calendar month in Jacksonville's recorded history with 0.00 inches of rain. Extremely dry in November, little over 2 inches in December, 1.3 in January, and about 2/3 of an inch of rain in February. Now let's compare that to the averages, what we typically would see in each month. And September typically is still in the wet season in North Florida, South Georgia. So we were nearly 5.5 inches drier than average in September. We continued the drier than average theme through October. Of course, November didn't have any rainfall, so we were completely below average there in November. December was drier than average, so was January, and so was February. So when you add it all up, even though we have seen in Jacksonville more than 8.5 inches of rain since September, that's almost 14 inches drier than average. That's more than a foot below average, and that's not only the case in Jacksonville, but all across North Florida and South Georgia, running 10 to 15 inches of rain below average since the beginning of September of 2025. And that's what you can see here, even though this map is showing the reds for this month, which is only about a week into March. Of course, we haven't had much of any rainfall in March, but let's go back to say the last 3 months, the last 90 days. As we look here across North Florida, South Georgia, you'll still see oranges and reds. So that's about 50 to 75% drier than average, or of average. 100% would be your typical amount of rainfall. So across the whole area, not only just in Jacksonville, it's very dry. So that includes all of Georgia and all of Florida. And in fact, the entire state of Florida is in some form of a drought, at least a moderate drought. So 100% of the Sunshine State is covered in at least a moderate drought. And that's the first time that's ever happened since the drought monitor began back in the year 2000. Now also, all of Northeast Florida, Southeast Georgia, all of the Action News Jax viewing area is in an extreme drought. That was updated last week. This map is updated once a week. And this is now the worst, most significant drought that Jacksonville in our area has seen since 2012. So of course we need some rain soon, but because of the lack of rainfall over the last several months, we actually have some water shortages to talk about. So the St. Johns River Water Management District just recently issued a Phase 2 severe water shortage advisory, and that does include Duval County, which is where Jacksonville is, Nassau, Baker, Clay, Putnam, St. Johns, Flagler, and even Marion counties as well. Now, what does that water shortage mean? Mainly, a Phase 2 water shortage means that irrigation, of course, is restricted. So landscape irrigation is now restricted to just once a week, and it depends on the address that you have. So if you live at an odd-numbered address, then your permitted time to irrigate is Saturdays before 10 o'clock in the morning or after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If your address is an even number for residential addresses, your day to do that is on Sunday before 10 o'clock in the morning or after 4 o'clock in the evening. And if it's a non-residential address, your day to do that is on Tuesday. So this is a Phase 2 water shortage. It keeps going from there. There's a Phase 3 and a Phase 4. And if we do get to Phase 3, some other stuff that will be restricted, which might be things you don't really think about. Golf course irrigation is restricted even further. Restaurants can't serve water unless by request. So just these other ways to conserve water, because our rivers, our lakes, our aquifers are running very low given how significant the drought is. Another factor to talk about is the number of freezes we had at the International Airport in Jacksonville this past cold season. 22, which is quite a bit higher than the average of 14 that we see in Jacksonville each year. So we had quite a bit of freezes, especially inland and away from the beaches. And when we compare that to the number of freezes that we've had all the way back since 08, 09, it's pretty big compared to some of the years in the early 2020s where we didn't have many freezes at all. So above average in terms of the number of freezes, 32 or below, and the most that Jacksonville has seen since 2010, 2011. Remember I said the worst drought, this is the worst drought since 2012. So it's been quite some time, and freezes actually help to dry out the soils even more. And so that's what we've been seeing across the area. Now, we have had warm temperatures lately. You might be tempted to say start the gardening or the spring cleaning there in the yard. We are likely done with a freeze, but just to show you the dates of the last freeze in Jacksonville since 2016, so since over the last 10 years, there's a few where we have had a freeze in the month of March, and not only in March, but mid to late March. In 2017, our last freeze was March 17th. So it's not a bad idea to hold off on planting anything until mid to late March, although with this particular year, it does appear that we are done with the freezing threat for much of the area, at least for Jacksonville. As we get towards late March, it appears very warm. Now, I mentioned all of that, the drought, the freezes, because that leads us into our wildfire discussion, as we are getting into the peak of our wildfire season in late March, April, and early May. So some things to note: many burn bans are in effect, and in Duval County, there's a year-round burn ban. So burning yard debris and other stuff like that, you can't do it. But because we've had several freezes, the vegetation is very dormant, and that dries out the top layer of the ground even more. And so when you combine the drought, days when we have low humidity, days when we have gusty winds, that is going to increase the wildfire threat. And over the last couple of weeks, if you've noticed or paid attention, we have had several wildfires that have gone out of control. So that's something to keep in mind, is that even though we have had a few bouts of rain lately, it hasn't been enough to help reduce the wildfire threat. So you just want to have that defensible space around your home and be smart. And when it comes to that fire danger, properly discarding cigarettes, not starting cars over grassy areas, especially if they're dry grass as well. And then again, those fires that you think are controlled can quickly become out of control if the wind is strong enough and if the air is dry enough. Now, we all need some rain, of course. We've been talking about that as we look ahead in time towards mid-March. It does appear that we will have above average precipitation across the eastern half of the U.S., drier than average across the southwestern tier of the United States. This is likely going to be in the form of a cold front or two that will bring the chance for a couple of showers. And even though it's technically an above average outlook here, it's still not expected to be significant rainfall. So we will take whatever we can get. But remember, we're about 14 to 15 inches drier than average since September. So it's going to take more than a foot of rain to eliminate the drought, and we're not going to have that anytime soon. But this is obviously much better to see versus these darker, drier colors here at the top. Now, this does include the timeline for the Players' Championship, which again is going to be next week in Jacksonville. So there could be some rain that impacts that, which we are tracking in your Action News Jax First Alert forecast. Last topic here I want to talk about is that we are heading towards spring, of course, so the days are getting longer, the temperatures are getting warmer. One variable I like to look at is the sun angle, which is the angle of the sun above the horizon in the sky, and that influences how direct your sunlight is, and that in turn influences temperature, UV index. You're going to start needing to wear some sunscreen pretty soon, if not already. Today, at the time of this recording, March 7th, the sun angle in Jacksonville is 55 degrees above the horizon. As we get towards mid-April, April 15th, it'll be 70 degrees above the horizon. And then summer, the summer solstice, that's the highest the sun is at the sky during the course of the year at solar noon. That's 83 degrees. So that sunlight, very intense, very direct. So as our days get longer and the sunlight gets more direct, the rate of our drying is going to be faster. So the drought is likely going to worsen before it gets better, unless we see any significant rain anytime soon. So hopefully that gives you a detailed insight into the drought that we've been seeing across North Florida, South Georgia lately, and why we so desperately need some rainfall. Fingers crossed we can get a good downpour pretty soon. We have had a few sea breeze days lately where the showers get going and then they push inland. It's just not a significant rainfall or soaking rain that we need to help eliminate the drought. I'm Action News Jax First Alert Meteorologist Trevor Gibbs.